Good evening, everyone, and welcome to tonight's meeting of the Environment and Place Overview and Scrutiny Committee. My name's Chris Rigby, and I'll be chairing this part of the meeting. So, item number 1 will be apologies. Rebecca, can I ask if you've got any apologies for this evening?
Yes, Chair. Can I just run through the housekeeping first? Is that
And the
okay?
housekeeping as well, thank you.
Yeah, no problem. So please note that this meeting is being recorded by the Council for live broadcast and will be published on the Council website for a minimum of 6 months. The meeting may also be recorded or streamed for live or subsequent broadcast by members of the public, although ultimate discretion in this matter lies with the Chair in case of disruption. For those in the room, please note if the fire alarm sounds, please exit the building by way of the nearest available signed fire exit route and make your way to the assembly point in the front car park of this building. Finally, please ensure background noise is kept to a minimum and mobile phones and other devices are turned off or switched to a silent setting for the duration of the meeting. For those in the room, this includes turning off microphones and turning the volume down completely on your laptops. Apologies, Chair. We've received apologies from Councillor Joe Clements, Councillor Brian Chick and Councillor Jamie Martin, and Councillor Jackie Edwards will be joining us later due to another meeting.
Thank you. And no substitute members?
There are no substitute members.
Great, thank you very much. That takes us on to item 3, where I'm going to hand over to Councillor Dorton Gibson as Vice Chair of the committee to preside over the next item, as I'll be standing for Chair for the next municipal year as well.
Thank you. I'm seeking a nomination for Chair of the Overview and Scrutiny Panel. Somebody like to make a nomination? Thank you. Councillor Ricketts.
Very happy to nominate Councillor Rigby. Thank you very much.
And I'm very happy to second that.
Thank you very much indeed. Do we have any other nominations? Nope. Passed. Back to you. Congratulations.
Thank you very much, and thanks everyone again for your trust doing this. I really appreciate it. Item number 4, unsurprisingly, is going to be election of the Vice Chair for the next municipal year. So again, I'll just look to the floor and see if we've got any nominations for the Vice Chair. Councillor Ricketts.
And just to keep the status quo, I'm more than delighted to nominate Councillor Dorton Gibson again for Vice Chair for the next municipal year.
Thank you. And yes, Councillor Gillett to second that. I was going to say I'd second that as well, but great that. So any more nominations? None coming forward. So in that case, I'd like to congratulate Councillor Dorton Gibson on being Vice Chair again.
Thank you.
Okay, flying straight into item number 5 and declarations of interest. Do any councillors have any disclosable pecuniary interests or other interests on any items on the agenda? That looks like no all around. And then minutes of the last meeting. The last meeting was held on the 25th of February. Can I just check that there's consensus that we can accept those minutes? Agreed? Yeah. Perfect, thank you. And item number 7 is public issues. And Rebecca, any public issues?
There are no public issues, Chair.
Wonderful, thank you. So moving on to item 8, which is the recommendation tracker. You'll see in our agenda, we have that. There are no recommendations which I need to highlight on this stage, but it's on everyone's agenda. So if anyone has got anything they want to ask about it or push on, no, in that case, we can push through. And we go straight into the meat of the meeting, so to speak, which is item number 9. And this is where we I welcome Gail Scholes, who's our Chief Sustainability Officer, and also the Southwest Net Zero Hub are joining us this evening. So it's Smart Sandhu from there. I'd just like to invite Councillor Andy Hadley as well, whose portfolio it is, to join us. And yeah, we're going to hear from Southwest Net Zero Hub and a little bit about their work. So Gail, I don't know if you're joining us to introduce this item, or Andy? Gail, thanks.
Yes, hi. So we've got SMAR on the line. The Southwest Net Zero Hub are kind of our regional body. We sit on the board, so we're very privileged to be part of some of the projects that they're sort of developing. certainly in terms of decarbonisation projects. So we thought that it'd be really useful to hear from SMAR. So I'll probably introduce SMAR now. Thank you.
Thank you. Hi, Ismail. Thanks for joining us. We're really looking forward to hearing about your projects and what you can tell us about what's going on with the Southwest Net Zero Hub. If you'd, just like to give yourself a brief introduction. Thanks.
Hi there. I hope you can all hear me well. My name is Smar. I am a project manager at the Southwest Net Zero Hub. I'm joined by my colleague and manager, John Allen, who's also online, although he might be in the car, so he might not be able to sort of turn his camera on and contribute much to discussions. But we thought it would be useful for John to kind of be present as well. I've got some slides. I don't know whether you'd like me to share those and just jump straight in?
Absolutely. Please, we'd love to see them. Thank
Okay.
you.
Oh. Sorry, I'm just going to do my technical awkward.
That's all right. Take your time.
There we go. Okay, cool. So yeah, good evening all. Thank you again for inviting the Southwest Net Zero Hub to contribute to this discussion. I was asked by Gail to talk a little bit about the Southwest Net Zero Hub and how we have and are keen to continue to support BCP Council to move from the net zero strategy that you have put in place with the local area energy plan and into sort of project delivery. I will cover three main areas. I will talk obviously a lot about renewable energy pipeline development. That's kind of the meat of our work. I will also talk a little bit about community energy, and then I will talk about how early stage project development can support future funding and delivery decisions. And I hope that the key message that you are going to take away from this presentation is that councils are, like yours, are best placed to sort of access funding and attract partners and sort of make confident investment decisions when they have a clear set of defined and evidence-based projects. So I've structured the presentations around four key areas. I'll introduce the Southwest Net Zero Hub to begin with, who we are, our current remit, the type of support that we can provide to local authorities. I'll then talk about project pipelines, what we mean by a renewable energy pipeline, how one is developed and why it matters for moving from strategy into delivery. The third section looks at community energy, where it can fit alongside things like council-led or commercial delivery, and why Great British Energy and the local power plan make this particularly timely. And finally, I'll bring this back to BCP, looking at how the local area energy plan sets the strategic direction, what the targets imply in terms of delivery, and what needs to be in place to move from that ambition into practical projects. So very quickly about the Southwest Net Zero Hub. Some of you may have heard of us. We are one of 5 regional hubs in England. Our work is funded by the Department for Energy, Security and Net Zero, or DESNZ. We are primarily tasked with delivering the local energy ambitions and targets of Great British Energy. So our focus is on supporting local authorities and public sector partners across the region to develop and deliver net zero projects. I've outlined here the key sort of objectives that underpin our work, which are kind of built around the concepts of supporting investment readiness, increasing the number of net zero projects, and helping build the knowledge, partnership, and public engagement needed to deliver them. So this slide sets out the practical role of the hub. As I mentioned just now, our purpose is to help local authorities and other public sector partners move from net zero ambition into projects that can actually be developed. So the support we provide is mainly early stage project development support, and that can include impartial advice, technical input, where appropriate funding for especially consultants to undertake feasibility studies, options appraisals, business case work, and other sort of development work. A key part of our role is helping to de-risk the early stages of the project. So that is often the point where the councils know that there is an opportunity but need more evidence before committing capital, before committing procurement resource or significant officer time. We also support financial assessments and delivery model appraisals as part of that development work. So, for example, understanding where a project is better suited to council-led delivery, how PPAs work and how PPAs can improve the business case for that project, how community energy fits into the delivery of that project, or any other sort of partnership models that the councils are interested in exploring. We are not a finance broker or an investment advisor. Our focus is on helping projects become better defined and better evidenced so that they can move on towards funding and have those investment discussions with the relevant bodies. Increasingly, that includes helping councils explore local power opportunities and particularly partnerships with community energy groups. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about that in a minute. And I guess like the common thread across all of this is pipeline development. We are usually helping councils get from we think there is an opportunity here to we understand exactly which projects are viable, we understand the risks, and we kind of have quite a clear view of what needs to happen next. So I mentioned earlier that kind of the sort of core function of the hub is this kind of concept of developing project pipeline. So I thought I would talk a little bit more about what we understand what we mean by a project pipeline. And I kind of wanted to sort of clarify that that doesn't simply mean a spreadsheet of possible sites or assets. A useful pipeline is a way of moving from sort of broad opportunity to informed decision making, if you like. So for each potential project, the council will want to have sufficient information to understand whether it is technically feasible, whether there are ownership or lease constraints, what the likely costs and benefits are, what delivery routes might be appropriate, what risks or what governance decisions need to be resolved, etc. So that does not mean every site needs to be taken through detailed visibility at once. And the purpose of pipeline development is to create a structured way of comparing opportunities, prioritizing resources, identifying which projects are most likely to progress, that kind of thing. Also, it helps avoid treating each site as a one-off decision. So instead, the councils can start to understand where projects can be grouped, phased, progressed through common delivery routes, etc. So I guess the value of the pipeline is not just in attracting finance, it's also about making better decisions, which assets to prioritize, what support is needed, what risks need to be addressed, what needs to happen next to move projects towards funding, procurement or delivery. So this slide sets out the typical way the hub approaches pipeline development. We usually start with assets that the council owns, controls or influence. For example, rooftops, car parks, depots, landfills, agricultural land, commercial sites, any sort of asset that the council has control over. We then look at which of these assets may be suitable for renewable energy. We consider technical potential, site constraints, grid position, deliverability. And for the stronger opportunities, we can then test financial merit and delivery models. And where it makes sense, we tend to group sites into portfolios that can be progressed towards delivery rather than sort of treating each site separately. And the aim of this work is to help councils move from a long list of possible opportunities to a smaller set of prioritized, better evidence projects that can progress towards business case, funding, procurement, and delivery. So this slide gives a few examples of the type of pipeline development work the hub is already supporting across the Southwest. And the examples here are deliberately quite varied because different councils are at different stages. So a few examples in Somerset, the work we are supporting there is quite strategic. We're looking across land and assets, assessing renewable energy potential, but also considering whether renewables are the best use of those assets compared with other options such as disposal, housing and other sort of strategic priorities. In Dorset, the work is more portfolios based. We are looking at a large number of commercial sites and are testing the technical, commercial and legal feasibility of rooftop PV. The aim there is to move from a long list of possible sites towards a clearer view of which projects are most viable. In Mid-Devon, the focus is more on a specific barrier, and that is how to deploy rooftop PV on council-owned tenanted buildings, where the technical case may be relatively straightforward, but the legal aspects such as the lease, consent, the relationship between landlord and tenant, and how benefits and costs are shared between the two create complexity. We've also recently launched a project on the Isle of Wight, and here the pipeline work is being linked to the wider grid constraints that exist on the island. And the purpose is not just to identify individual projects, but it is also to build an evidence base that can support sort of strategic discussions and negotiations with a number of grid stakeholders. So what can happen when a council has already moved through the earlier stages of pipeline development? Portsmouth and Southampton are useful examples because they are not starting from the question of whether rooftop solar is viable on their estate. They have already developed and delivered a number of local generation projects. So the conversation here has moved on to what is next, how can we make better use of these assets, what opportunities have we not yet explored? So, for example, in Portsmouth, the council has largely maximised rooftop PV on its own assets. So it is now exploring wider routes to meet its renewable energy and net zero ambitions, including options such as project acquisition or entering into virtual power purchase agreements with large sites. In Southampton, the council has also already built a significant amount of local generation and is now looking at how to maximise the value of that generation, including through complex site arrangements that could help monetize surplus electricity. So I guess the point here is that more mature pipelines create optionality. Once a council understands its asset base, project risks, delivery models, it can start to consider more sort of sophisticated approaches, if you like. But those options only become realistic once the underlying projects are sufficiently understood. And this is why we keep going on about pipeline development and about the importance of that early development work. So I've talked a lot about project pipelines from the perspective of identifying and developing viable opportunities, and I thought it would be worth kind of focusing on another topic that we are focusing a lot at the Hub at the moment, which is how should opportunities be delivered, and particularly what role can community energy play in that delivery. So community energy is one possible delivery route within that wider pipeline. It is not the right model for every project, but it can add real value where there is, for example, a suitable asset, where there is an active or an emerging community group, and where there is a strong local benefit case. It can complement council-led or commercial delivery in a few ways. It can bring local ownership and community benefit into projects, which can be particularly valuable where projects are very visible in the local community or where public engagement is very important. It can also help progress smaller, more complex or lower return sites that may not be attractive to purely commercial developers, but could still deliver local carbon cost or community benefits. There is also a wider value point where projects generate a surplus. Community energy models can help retain more of that value locally, with income reinvested into further local initiatives, such as energy advice, fuel poverty work, or sort of other community projects. So I guess the practical question for a council is not should everything be community energy, it is more which parts of the pipeline might be suitable for community energy, what role does the council want to play? Are we going to act simply as the asset owner? Are we going to take more of a facilitating role, a partner, a funder, or an off-taker? And I'm going to touch on those aspects in a little bit more detail. The reason community energy is particularly relevant right now is because of the direction of national policy for Great British Energy and the Local Power Plan. So the Local Power Plan sets out an ambition for every community to have the opportunity to benefit from and potentially own a local energy project by 2030. And this is a significant shift because it places local and community-owned energy much more firmly within the national delivery agenda. It also includes two funding routes, which are particularly relevant here, a community fund for community energy projects and a partnership fund for for joint local authority and community energy projects. For BCP, the key point is readiness. So if partnership funding does become available, or I should say when partnership funding becomes available, the councils that are best placed to respond will be those that already have a sense of where the opportunities are. So this means understanding which sites might suit community energy, who the potential partners are, and again, what role does the council want to play in that project. So that means that having every project, that does not mean that you need to have every project fully developed now, but it does mean that you might want to start thinking about what work is needed in order to identify those suitable sites, understand sort of initial constraints, and test whether community energy adds any value in the potential delivery of them. So how can councils support community energy, and how do they make it deliverable in practice? I guess the first point is around strategy. Community energy works best when it is built into wider net zero asset and place-based strategies, rather than treated as an add-on or a sort of one-off opportunity. The second one is sites. Community energy groups often have appetite and local knowledge, but they need access to suitable opportunities, and this is a key kind of learnings that we've reached over kind of years of working with this sector. And councils can help by identifying assets such as roofs or lands or buildings that may be appropriate, and by sharing enough early information to allow those opportunities to be assessed. This is also where data gaps can become a barrier, so starting with a small number of pilot sites can be a sensible way to test the approach. The third is role. The council does not have to take the same role in every project. In some cases, it may simply make an asset available. In others, it may be a facilitator or a partner. It may be the funder of that project, or it may act as the off-taker for the electricity that is generated from a given asset. Being clear on that early helps manage expectation and risks, and also helps shape the project from early on. And the fourth is governance. A lot of community energy projects slow down, not because the idea is weak, but because the internal route is unclear. So who signs off roof access? Who considers procurement? Who reviews the leases? Who agrees the commercial terms? Having those functions within the council, property, legal, procurement, finance, sustainability, aligned, makes delivery much easier. So I guess the practical message is to start small, to use early feasibility to test viability, and to develop a repeatable approach that can be scaled across the pipeline. So just to bring it back to BCP and the local area energy plan that was launched late last year, the LEAP is a strong strategic piece of work because it sets out the scale of the local energy transition and identifies the main interventions needed to reach net zero. A few points that I've pulled out that I thought were particularly relevant to today's discussion. So first, BCP has an area-wide net zero target for 2045. Second, electricity demand is expected to rise significantly due to the electrification of heat, transport, and other parts of the energy system. And electricity demand is expected to double against the baseline by 2045. At the same time, the LEAP identifies a target of around 400 gigawatt hours of local renewable generation, which would meet around 13% of projected electricity demand in 2045. So local generation is not the whole answer, but it is a meaningful and necessary part of that pathway. Rooftop PV is especially important in BCP because the area is urban, ground-mounted solar is constrained, and there's obviously sensitivities around green belts. So that means rooftops, car parks, council-owned or council-influenced assets become particularly important. So the point here is that the LEAP gives BCP a clear strategic direction, and the next step is turning that direction into a structured set of deliverable opportunities, understanding which assets are viable, which ones should be prioritized, and which delivery routes are most appropriate. This slide also pulls out some of the specific LEAP targets that are most relevant to our area of focus. The first is the ambition to survey 5,000 buildings for rooftop PV suitability by Q1 of 2028. And that is a significant undertaking, and it points to the need for a structured assessment process rather than a purely reactive or ad hoc approach. The second is the target for more than 100 new council rooftop PV installations by Q1 2030. And that is important because it moves beyond assessment and into delivery. But to meet that pace, the council will need to understand, again, which sites are most viable, which are the quick wins, which are more complex, and which need further feasibility and detailed business case work. And the third is the ambition for 10 community-led energy projects by Q1 2030. And that links directly, obviously, to the community energy discussion earlier. The council will need to identify where community energy is the right delivery model, what role it wants to play, what partners it may want to attract, and how to support projects through early stage development. These targets show the scale of delivery required. They also suggest that the challenge is not simply finding individual opportunities, and it is about creating a repeatable process and a strategy for assessing, prioritizing, and progressing projects at scale and at pace. And that is where pipeline development becomes important because it helps avoid each site being treated as a standalone decision and instead allows the council to think in terms of portfolios, phasing, delivery models, internal governance, towards a kind of a group of projects rather than towards an individual asset. I also wanted to touch briefly on some of the finance considerations in the LEAP because I thought they might be relevant to tonight's discussions. So the LEAP recognises that delivery will require more than identifying technical opportunities. So Action 1 specifically looks at developing a net zero fund to support LEAP delivery across sectors, including looking at different financing mechanisms such as sort of traditional capital markets or community municipal investment. And that is important, but for any finance route to be meaningful, it needs to be matched by a clear set of projects. So the practical questions become which projects are most viable, because you will want to know what scale of investment is required, which assets are you putting up to potential investors, the delivery route will also dictate what investment and funding options are available to deliver that project. The reason why this level of understanding is important is because there is unlikely to be one single finance route that works for all net zero projects. So, for example, smaller rooftop solar schemes on council-owned buildings may be suited to council capital or to invest to save approaches or public loans. Larger renewable portfolios may need borrowing, a PPA or an ESCO structure or a delivery partner. Community energy obviously may be suited to certain type of assets and may unlock access to community shares, community municipal investment or future GB partnership funding. More complex tenanted assets may need legal and commercial models around leases, licenses, and sort of synchronizing PPAs with those lease agreements. So the finance question becomes more practical when it is linked to project type. What is the asset? Who owns it? Who uses the energy? Who takes the risk? Who receives the benefit? And what level of project evidence is needed before a decision can be made? That is why early project development is important. It helps turn the finance conversation from broad question of how do we fund net zero into a more practical set of decisions around how do we fund this portfolio of projects that will get us this much closer to our net zero targets and ambitions. So this final slide, I hope, brings together the discussion so far and kind of brings it back to what needs to happen next to move from the local area energy plan ambition into delivery. The first element is a prioritised project pipeline. BCP already has a strong strategic evidence base for the LEAP and has existing site assessment work underway. And the next step is to build from that and identify which opportunities should be progressed next. Which ones are most viable, deliverable, most strategically important. And yeah, where it makes sense, projects can be also grouped into portfolios, which can improve scale, value, and delivery efficiency. The second element is having clear delivery models, and I spoke a little bit more about community energy being one of those. Not every project will be best delivered in the same way. Some may be council-led, some may be commercially delivered, some may be appropriate for community energy, and some may need other sort of partnership models. The community energy point is particularly important in the context of the local power plan and future GBE partnership opportunities, but it needs to be linked to suitable assets and realistic delivery routes. The third element is investment-ready evidence and governance, and that means understanding the technical, legal, commercial, and financial risk, and having clear internal routes through finance, legal, procurement, property, and sustainability teams. Without that, projects get stuck between feasibility and decision-making. So the overall message is the local area energy plan gives BCP the direction of travel. The task now is to turn that into a structured set of deliverable projects with the right delivery models, governance, and evidence in place to support business case, procurement, and delivery. I decided to do some dynamic stuff. So thank you very much for your time. I hope that's been useful, or at least a little bit interesting. I welcome any further questions, and let us know if there's anything else that we can sort of support with. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sab. That was really interesting and really in-depth. To explain a little bit now, as we're the Overview and Scrutiny Committee, we probably have like about a 20-minute session of asking you questions. Some might be towards yourself and John possibly, and also maybe towards Gail and Councillor Hadley here as well. And then as a committee, sort of wrapping this up within about half an hour, we've probably got on the agenda for it to come up with any recommendations we might want to put forward to Councillor Hadley or to Cabinet. Before I open the floor for questions, one thing I should do is I didn't declare an interest at the start, but I probably should now I've heard that presentation, is that my full-time employment is with a national community energy cooperative. So we're not doing any work with BCP at the moment, and I don't believe we're doing any with South West Net Zero Hub as well, but that's just for transparency purposes. So I will look to the floor first of all and see if anyone wants to open up the questioning. Councillor Ricketts.
Yeah, I've got a couple of questions. How can BCP fast track like project approvals to secure a larger share of the hub's regional funding? And also, are you helping our officers to write the bids, or are you just judging them? Two parts of that.
Smart.
I'm not sure I understand the first question, so I'll maybe answer the second one and hope that John will take the first one. So yes, we do work with BCP. We have been working for a number of years with the officers. Our focus in terms of accessing specific funding, and I don't know what you mean by the regional fund. I don't know whether you meant the partnership fund. That's not out yet, but I think the role that we are going to play in that is to support both councils like yours and also community energy groups in kind of developing projects sufficiently to be kind of eligible, if you like, for applying for those kind of funding opportunities. So our role is not necessarily to judge or to just to score. We do a lot of hand-holding, a lot of early project development work in-house just to help those stakeholders understand how they need to shape their projects to kind of be eligible for each sort of funding opportunity. I don't know, I hope that answers your question. And if you don't mind repeating your first question, perhaps between John and I can answer that.
Yeah, it was, yes, thank you, Simone, that was great. It was, how can BCP fast track project approval to secure a larger share of the funding that's available?
Do you want me to take that, Smile?
Yes, please, John. Yeah.
So right now, essentially the funding's all going to come from GBE. I'm guessing you're talking about capital funding here. The funding at the moment is coming out quite sporadically through GBE. We're not totally clear on how much and where this money is coming from, but obviously SMAR's indicated the partnerships fund, which is there, and obviously the community energy fund, which we know that should be coming out. The community energy fund has been running for the last couple of years. In terms of our funding that we have an ability to support in terms of revenue, not capital, and it's a development fund. Now, essentially, in terms of fast tracking it, there is no fast tracking it. There is a process that we go through. So it's finding a project. It goes through our internal processes, and it also goes through, well, depending on scale, it goes through our board, which I think Gail sits on our board as well. It's about working closely with us. That's all. It's working closely with SMAR to find the projects and then develop, and then we can help develop them. But it's in terms of, if you're talking about the capital, we need to understand what your pipeline is and where the projects are and what you can take forwards. And then GBE do come to us and say, what's happening in the region? What have you got? And then we can show what projects they might be looking at funding in the future.
Lovely, thank you very much.
I hope that helps.
Can I just expand on that a little bit? And I suppose the big question that I want to phrase it is, if you were us now, if you were BCP Council and you were here, what would you be screaming at us to be doing to put ourselves in the best possible position? Because from the presentation, looking at the other local authorities which you used as examples, it appears that we're possibly a step or half a step behind some of those. So what can we be doing to give ourselves the best possible opportunities right now?
I think, I guess, from our perspective, and John, feel free to kind of come in and add to my answer, is things that we've been engaging with Gail and her team about, which is kind of understanding what your assets are, and kind of doing that early sort of data gathering sort of work, which sounds simple, but is not, and kind of engaging with us to help you sort of structure that in a way that doesn't mean that you just develop, one building at a time with, kind of a drip feeding towards that target, and just kind of giving us the opportunity to work with you, understand what your asset base is, and kind of start kind of building more of a kind of, like I keep saying in my presentation, that kind of pipeline of projects. So it's kind of, I guess, just tidying your books and engaging with us around, that early development work, to help you identify where the opportunities are, and where the priorities should be. And I think that would probably be the first step from where we sit, from our area of work. I'm sure there's other kind of elements that might be relevant to this committee, but from kind of where we sit in terms of kind of renewable energy delivery, that's kind of what we tend to kind of prioritize with the councils we work with. And those examples that we gave, Southampton and Portsmouth, they're now in a really good position where they can explore those more sophisticated sort of delivery models and financing, or not financing, but those kind of more sophisticated ways of monetizing the assets that they've developed. But they too started with with early feasibility work, with pipeline development. So that's, I guess, that's the kind of foundation of the kind of the work that we do and the work that we encourage the councils to do.
Thank you. Councillor Hadley.
Thank you, Chair. I think the South West Net Zero Hub have been really helpful to us on a number of projects, and one of those is currently a study looking at heat areas networks, zoning for heat networks, and also our LEAP was one of the earliest in the country. We were quite leading on that. I think where we haven't been leading as an area And I can remember 12, 15 years ago, quite a lot of work on solar on roofs in BCP is consistency. You know, we sort of been quite stop-start in our approach, whereas particularly Bath is a really good example where a community energy organisation was sort of spun out from the council and been really successful and supported in the long term. So I think it's sustaining something for the long term is something I'd be really keen to get back to with the help of the hub. And that's also where I know Portsmouth, you know, their ferry port, international ferry port, is owned by the council, and they've been consistently investing in that in the sense of net zero, and abstracting heat out of the water, natural ventilation systems, car park reports on the roof, solar on the roof. So I think there's lots of stuff going on elsewhere, and there has been good stuff going on in BCP. It's just not been a consistent approach, and we've also not had that sort of community piece, which we will need if we're going to, to Vanessa's question, if we're going to succeed in getting money out of GB Energy. It's, you know, they're making it very clear it's in partnership. We can't just do that as a council.
Yeah, I think you're right. Consistency is definitely key. Gail, I've got you next.
Yeah, and you know, what I'd probably say is it's not one size fits all. So with that pipeline of opportunity, and I think both John and Smar would probably agree that some of the criteria that comes down from government and GB Energy means that, you know, some of the projects and pipeline that we have, you know, ready and sort of, you know, business cases developed, then needs to be adapted to fit some of the criteria. So, you know, that's the work that myself and my team are putting together at the moment. So we have done, you know, we've done a lot of desktop work. We've got the data. I think we're getting a much better handle on data and the assets that we own and the pipeline of projects that we can start delivering on, particularly rooftop solar. So that's probably out of all of the projects where we've got a fairly sort of healthy pipeline that we could start to really look at and integrate. So, but there's two parts to this, because obviously we've got council projects where we have some control over, or a lot of control over, and then we've got area wide. And so it's, when I say one size doesn't fit all, we've got to think about our role in delivering some of these sort of area wide projects as well. So how do we pull some of those community energy projects together? And it's what's going to be attractive. So, you know, to attract investment and to attract some of the community ownership types of models, we've got to have those assets that they feel they could co-deliver with us. So a lot of the community energy projects, you know, they want to, in particular, they're really interested in schools. So that's an area that they're keen to put rooftop solar on. They're also interested in, obviously, community buildings, but a smaller scale. So when we bring community energy into the fold, we've got to really start to think about, well, what sort of projects and finance arrangements are going to be attractive to that group, and have we got those projects and that pipeline ready. So, it's a huge piece of work, because actually to be ready for some of this, we've got to have the asset, we've got to have the pipeline, absolutely. And it's going to be that blend of finance. So it's probably not just going to be, you know, the council looking at trying to get a finance package together. It's probably going to be a blend, you know, of that sort of public-private sector finance arrangement. So I think as a council, we've got to develop the pipeline in the first place. So let's get a nice, healthy pipeline in place so that we're ready. We can work with the hub as we do already. We're sort of developing the pipeline for some of the opportunities coming down from GB Energy, and really think about, you know, but how do we get closer to delivery? What do some of those delivery models look like in particular? And that is going to be procurement, finance, legal. So it's aligning all of those aspects, I think, for BCP.
Very direct question to you, Gail. Have you got the resource that you need to do it in your team?
No, it's probably the answer. As you know, we are a fairly small team, and we do tap into resource across the council. Obviously, you know, Kelly's here, and there's members in her team who are working on decarbonisation plans. There's members in transport, but no, I mean, I think if you ask that question to any council, they would be saying they've not got enough resource to deliver, certainly with those targets. So remember, a lot of this was delivery by 2030. We've got 100 rooftop schemes to put on our own corporate estate. We've got 5,000 to do area wide. We're 4 years, we're 4 years away from that. And, delivery has been fairly slow to date. So we are going to have to sort of be really resourceful and creative about how we can deliver some of those targets.
Councillor Hadley, and then I'll go on to Councillor Rice after you.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I think clearly the answer is no, and our real challenge is that the same list that SMAR gave us in terms of those groups, procurement, legal, they're always the ones that are bottlenecks for almost everything we do, because they are also quite thinly resourced and their capacity. And that interested me in terms of some of the examples that SMAR gave, actually, in terms of what Southampton and Portsmouth are doing, because we've had some conversations about, well, how do we port our excess energy elsewhere? How do you do some of the things that they're doing, because they've reached the point where they can get on with that. I guess it would be really interesting to understand how we can shortcut some of that in terms of the learning and access to the outputs of the learning that others are doing. And that's something that I think would help us in terms of helping our procurement colleagues to be able to more quickly get through this or other elements. So I guess that's sort of a networking piece. And we had a conversation the other day around, should we create a Wessex network for particularly for solar and community energy, and there was a feeling that we've already got networks under the South West Net Zero Hub, but it is that exchange of ideas and common purpose that is hopefully really helpful to us to trying to get more out of what we have got.
I think. Sorry, just to add to that, I mean, both Plymouth and Southampton, they've been in the space operating sort of energy efficiency and heat networks in particular for decades. So they set some really early policy, which was agreed and signed off by council. Southampton's is probably one of the oldest heat network schemes. So, they've had a history of delivering these projects, but also they've seen the benefit of that. So, and we're still very much we're at kind of almost proof of concept. So we've got to develop the business case to be able to get the finance to support it. And, some of it delivers a really good payback period, but we've just got to make sure that we've got the business cases that we can present to council, because that's our evidence trail. We can present the facts and then try and work out how that's actually going to be financed and delivered.
Thank you. Excuse me. Thank you. And just before I go to Councillor Rice, Councillor Ricketts, do you have something on this topic?
Yeah, I was actually, I think Andy's probably answered it, because I was just going to ask if there are any quick wins that we can take from Portsmouth and Southampton, but it seems like you're already working with them to see if there are any things that we can do to just kickstart our initiative in this.
To be honest, we're keen to work with them. We haven't started working with them, particularly beyond the discussions at meetings, but I think that's something we could develop.
So coming back on that, can I ask Smart and John if they think that there are any quick wins that we could take from Portsmouth and Southampton?
Do you want me to go on this one? Quick. This, to be brutal, they're a long way ahead. They are looking. They're going down things that councils always want to do, like carport solars, but they're putting in large scale solar carports within their sites because they have completely packed out all of their operational buildings rooftop solar, and that's the quick win. The quick win is get your solar sorted on the roofs of all your buildings, because that you have the best consumption site. The consumption, it's the cheapest to go up, it's the easiest to install. That's where you start off. Where they're going down is where we can we can always feed in because we work through, and as Smar mentioned, things like complex sites, which is utilizing changes to the balancing and settlement code, where you can get you can increase the value that you're getting from these rooftop solar sites as well. We will include that in what we're in the work that we do, but the wins are get the rooftop sorted. Once you've got all your rooftops sorted, then you can start looking at commercial sites. Then you can start looking at land assets. It's actually, from our point of view, it's quite simple of where these wins can come from. You just and I think the first question was, what are you screaming to do? And Smart said it perfectly. Understand the assets, understand the opportunities. There's a bit in terms of understanding, grid is always going to be tricky when you start going up to that larger scale. But in a sense, it's just get those first steps done. And I hate the word the easy wins, but there are easy wins to be had, I think. But we need to understand what they could be.
I just wanted to kind of add a couple of points to the discussion. This kind of just the points that have been raised just now, just in terms of kind of learning from Portsmouth and Southampton. I kind of just touched on it quite briefly in my presentation, but one of our objectives is apologies, it's almost 7 o'clock. I don't usually function at this time beyond sort of changing nappies and that kind of thing. So one of our objectives is around sort of knowledge sharing and kind of sort of enabling local authorities that have they're in a much better position than others, like Portsmouth and Southampton, and perhaps Devon is kind of up there as well, to kind of share knowledge from their own kind of work with other local authorities. So we're very much kind of able to and willing to kind of help BCP access kind of those learnings from those councils, and we're happy to kind of arrange those kind of knowledge sharing sessions and kind of discuss with Gail and Councillor Hadley around how they might want to go about that and how we can support that engagement. And there was a second point that I wanted to make, but that's just gone out of my head. So if I remember, I'll come back to it after Councillor Rice's question.
Thank you. Yeah, please do. Councillor Rice.
Thank you. Yeah, really helpful presentation. Thank you so much. My question was more around the community sort of pipeline of projects. I've recently listened to a podcast which featured Lawrence Weston, a town south of Bristol, that have put up their own wind turbine. It's very inspiring to listen to for anybody that's interested. And so my questions are around what, as ward councillors, can we do to help community groups get started with thinking about community-owned energy? So you mentioned schools. Is it worth us trying to engage early with schools to get this sort of going, or is the council already doing that? And then sort of the Lawrence Weston example, communities coming together to create their own community energy. Do you support local community groups as well as supporting the council, or would so those are my two main questions, really.
Yes, we work with community energy groups very much so. We have a dedicated community energy team led by our colleague Hayley, who's very passionate about pretty much everything that you've said. So we're doing a lot of work around sort of capacity building. So for areas or regions where there isn't a lot of community energy activity, there's no kind of active groups, we focus a lot on kind of building that capacity and enabling those groups to form, perhaps from other environmental sort of action groups and things like that, and kind of helping them understand how they can kind of expand into energy projects. And we also help more specifically with community energy groups of every sort of level of maturity, if you like, in terms of helping them access funding that comes out from DESNES or from GBE, and kind of where there are projects that are developing, kind of, again, like I said earlier, sort of help them shape those projects so that they kind of fit within the eligibility criteria for the funding that is available. So yeah, very much kind of we're very active in the community energy sector, and that's one of the reasons why I've kind of touched on that as one of the key delivery kind of routes that we think are, is very pertinent at the moment, I guess, and very relevant given the funding that's kind of coming out of Great British Energy. And yeah, I guess in terms of kind of the Lawrence Western sort of project, yeah, we very much like to talk about that as well, because it's kind of in our patch. And every time someone wants to go on a site visit in the southwest, we take them to Lawrence Western, because it's obviously a really nice story. But again, I think it kind of comes back to the point that John was making earlier, that they are also quite way ahead in terms of kind of, they're very well established. They have those very strong links with the councils, with the relevant councils, with Bristol, with West of England Combined Authority. So that kind of already put them in a good position to kind of look at a project of that scale. But I would say for BCP, for a council like who's kind of where you are in terms of kind of community energy activity, I think the focus needs to be a lot around capacity building. And we are doing actually work through our community energy group to kind of understand how we can build that capacity. And it's been mentioned earlier that there have been discussions about creating a network, which have not been very kind of successful. So we're now looking at what else we can do to kind of support community and energy sort of activity in BCP, because there needs to be some in order for you to be able to access the partnership funding that's coming out of GBE. So we kind of believe that, it would be a missed opportunity not to at least sort of understand where those opportunities are.
Just if I can come back directly about the schools, was there anything specific about encouraging our own local school within our own wards?
Can I?
Yes,
Sorry,
please do.
Live in the schools world. Love everything to do. I've spent a lot of time trying to support. Schools are incredibly difficult in terms of that level of support, but there is a massive network out there in the world. Essentially, Let's Go Zero are there in terms of climate as their climate ambassadors. There's also Reading University run a piece of work directly from the Department for Education. The issue that we always have is based around it's very hard to put solar panels on the roof of a school right now. And it partly because a school cannot take a loan, and any PPA from a solar panel is considered a loan by Treasury. There are pieces of work in place that we're trying to sort of engage with NISTA, who are rewriting the guidelines so that we can get these projects through. But we also, it's worth noting that we have a project right now with Wiltshire Council. We are assessing all 90 of the council maintained schools for solar opportunities, and they have their own. It's essentially it's kind of like a revolving loan fund that they're operating, but within the council itself to stack up as much solar on the rooftop of their buildings. And because it's council owned, it's a slightly more grey area, and they are able to do that. Multi-academy trusts make it slightly harder. But we have community groups that are desperate to support. So Communities for Renewables, which is based sort of a little bit more further west than you are, they have a pot of money to run soft solar loans for schools. So they're essentially they're ready to provide. It's a zero interest loan for schools to install solar on their rooftops. There are programs out there, and we can help with those with those programs. Schools are just difficult. It's really hard right now until the Treasury rules change, which we desperately hope. We thought it was going to be months ago, but essentially they started over a year ago. But there's not many people in there working on it, but they hopefully will have new guidelines out soon to support that. But not easy.
Okay, great, thank you.
Thanks, John. Really comprehensive answer. I've got Councillor Edwards next, and then I've got no one else on the list. So could I see if anyone else wants to speak after Councillor Edwards, or we'll look to wrap up after her question? Cool, Councillor Edwards.
Thank you, Chair. Just to let you know, there are schools with solar panels on. Certainly in my ward there are, and I know of others, so it can be done. But what I wanted to know is, I mean, the average person doesn't think of net zero every day. They're too busy with their lives to really think about it. So how do we sell this idea to our residents? And how can we show them the benefits of it? Because that's what they want to know. That's part of the selling of it. Because they've got to, if you want the communities to come together, you've got to get them on board with it.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, yeah, we could have another session on that, really. So I'll try to kind of keep my answer as brief as possible. I guess, yes, net zero, you're right, is not a popular term. I think we are seeing councils and all stakeholders really, or any developers sort of move towards more of a kind of narrative around cost savings, around addressing fuel poverty, around energy independence, you know, in the context of what's going on in the world and the benefits that, you know, kind of being able to generate our own energy can bring. And then in terms of kind of bringing communities together around sort of community energy initiatives, I guess beyond, again, beyond the sort of the energy, the cost savings, the kind of fuel poverty and all of that kind of all of those arguments. I guess there's also the point about retaining the kind of the value of generation projects within the community, and community energy works in a way where that is enabled, so the any sort of surplus from a community owned generation projects are retained within the local community and can get reinvested in a range of initiatives. But there are numerous sort of benefits to net zero generally, to community energy in particular, or to community action towards net zero in particular. I think, you know, that yeah, it's just a case of you know, the context in which you want to kind of deliver those messages, I guess. But yeah, there's numerous benefits, and yeah, I guess yeah, the cost and the fuel poverty arguments are probably the ones that we're seeing as the most kind of popular, if you like, at the moment. Yeah.
Thank you very much. I've not seen any other hands who want to follow up on questions. So I think given that it's 7 o'clock, we can probably thank you, Smart and John, for coming and joining us this evening. It's been really, really useful to hear from you. And I do appreciate that you did sort of sneak in there. There may be an opportunity to do another session for public engagement and how we can do that a little bit. So that may be something we look towards inviting you to and do in the future, because it's been great to hear from you both. So yeah, once again, thanks very much for coming in. We'll have a little discussion about recommendations, but they'll all be for the portfolio holder and cabinet. So yeah, thanks for joining us, and we'll let you get back to your evenings. Thanks very much.
No problem. Thank you.
thank you.
Good to meet you all. Cheers. Bye.
Okay. Are there any recommendations that anyone wants to make from that? Any further questions that you want to ask towards Councillor Hadley or Gail? I kind of got the feeling that maybe there's no recommendations that we particularly want to give, unless there's something around community engagement and looking to try and stimulate community groups wanting to come forward and volunteer their time and energy towards helping generate community energy. And I think the only thing I was going to suggest is probably teaching Councillor Hadley how to suck eggs, but to find a way that we can focus the resource on accelerating these projects as much as possible, because those examples of Portsmouth and Southampton, where they're actually generating good income now and can afford to go on and do the less easy to access projects, is really where we want to be. And like you say, just keeping that momentum in place. So I haven't got anything that I think we can deliver directly to Cabinet, but that'd be a recommendation for yourself and something that I feel you're doing. Councillor Hadley.
Thank you. Yeah, absolutely. Very happy to do that. Two things, I suppose. One is Dorset Community Energy do quite a lot of work elsewhere in Dorset. They are keen to do work within BCP, and we've been talking with them about, you know, do we have any suitable routes for them to use? They effectively invite the public to invest money in the scheme, and they've done a number of schools and some co-housing and also a wind turbine in Newburyport. But they see themselves as Dorset wide, so that's one potential route, is an existing organisation, which is easier than trying to start new organisations. The other is that Martin, who's here, has been doing a lot of work trying to progress our own estate, particularly the corporate estate. So we have put solar on the cafe on by Bournemouth Pier this winter. It's taken longer than we hoped, and some of that was learning lessons about how to try and drive some of those barriers that Smile mentioned earlier. We have a list of projects that we'd like to progress, and some of that is, again, we had some work with the previous finance director around a revolving fund to be able to invest, and then because a lot of the work is the funding is devolved, so individual areas cover their own costs. So we're saying, well, okay, we'll invest. You'll make a saving, and we need some of that back to reinvest in another roof. So we've already got that work underway, and I think we do need to absolutely, as highlighted, we need to accelerate that if we're going to get anywhere near the targets. And I think it is about fuel poverty, it is about savings, and actually that's far more the message rather than yes, it's actually going to be really good for net zero, and that in itself is going to be really good for nature recovery and some of the other things we really need to worry about. But the thing for the public is the bottom line for the organisation and helping those most in need in our community.
Thank you. Anyone like to add anything else on this topic? If not, we can happily bring this item to a close. Thanks very much for joining us both. Been really good, and we're always here if you want to bring other ideas to us. We're always willing to cheer them over and try and help develop policy. So next is item 10, which is the housing strategy review. And we've got Councillor Kieran Wilson and Kelly Dean, who's the Director of Housing and Public Protection, to introduce this report. So I'll let you get settled for a second. Sorry, we're just waiting for some people to leave the room there. And Councillor Wilson, is it you introducing this for us?
Yeah, happy to. Thank you for inviting us. Thank you for having us. I'm pleased to bring this. Sorry, I'm getting a bit of feedback. I'm pleased to bring this annual update on the housing strategy 21 to 27. At its heart, the report is about people and about something very important, making sure more residents have access to safe, secure and decent homes. And I think that it shows, even in a very challenging context, we've continued to make real progress. Over the past year, work has continued across all 5 priorities within the strategy, including increasing housing supply, strengthening homelessness prevention, improving housing options and choice, supporting neighbourhoods, and raising standards of safety and sustainability. Put simply, this is about keeping momentum, staying focused on what matters, and continuing to respond to the pressures that many residents, and we know many residents, are facing. There are some really genuinely positive achievements within the report. In the last financial year, we've delivered 145 affordable homes across the conurbation, and a further 243 are planned for the next financial year. Now, that doesn't seem like a huge amount I can accept, but that would clear our emergency waiting list, for example, currently, and also it equates to around 10% of our current waiting list. So it's a significant dent. More than 1,100 households were helped to avoid homelessness in the last year. Rough sleeping has reduced, and actually, hot off the press, we had a count last night, and that number was at 32, which I think, without going back and checking the records, but I think is our lowest number post-COVID, which is really impressive, and testament to all the hard work of my entourage behind me, who do amazing work continuously. And importantly, no families have spent more than 6 weeks in bed and breakfast accommodation for over a year, and I mean we're getting towards 2 years now. So it's really impressive stuff. We've also kept a really strong focus on the quality and safety of housing services, including achieving a C1, the highest compliance and governance rating from the regulator of social housing. Those are important results, and they reflect a great deal of effort across services and a lot of good partnership working across the board. At the same time, though, I think it's important to be honest about the pressures. Demand for housing remains high. Affordability continues to be a real issue for many residents, not just in terms of rent, but also cost of living and general price of everything. Temporary accommodation is still under strain, and the wider market conditions are affecting the pace of affordable housing delivery. We are also working in a changing regulatory environment. Obviously, people will be aware of the recent changes to the Renters' Rights Act, which is obviously a real positive, but it comes with higher expectations around assurance, compliance, and quality. So while these are all positives in many respects, it calls for realism, focus, and continued effort. Looking ahead, our priority is to build on this progress. That means continuing to grow and de-risk the affordable housing pipeline, deepening a prevention and early intervention in terms of homelessness, widening housing options for residents, and keeping safety, quality, and sustainability at the centre of everything we deliver. It also means using what we've learned to shape the next housing strategy. So it reflects both the evidence in terms of data that we've found, but also the day-to-day realities facing our communities across Bournemouth, Christchurch and Poole. What residents are actually feeling, because sometimes you can have the statistics in front of you, but they don't always tell the true picture. So overall, I hope this report gives the committee assurance that solid progress is being made, while also being clear about the challenges, and it provides a strong basis for the next phase of work. So happy to open it up to questions. And also, if everyone would like to go easy on me, I'm just recovering from illness. Give me soft, nice ones.
No.
That would be lovely. And any hard ones, I'll delegate. Cheers, guys.
Thank you. I'm glad to see you feeling well again. And, you know, this is never the easiest ride, so unlucky, but hopefully you'll get through it. Councillor Edwards, was that a question to start?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I have to say I'm going to slightly disagree with you over the Renters Reform Act, because I know quite a few people have been given notice to leave because their landlords are terrified of that act. So, but what I don't understand is some of the strategy of this that you give them to stop them being homeless is you tell them to stay put till the bailiffs come. I mean, I'm not too sure how good a strategy that is. And also, how do you help some people that have been happily paying their rent for quite a long time but are self-employed? And that can be difficult with letting agents, requiring certain accounts, and apparently to have a guarantor, the guarantor's got to earn 50,000 a year and things like this. So it is making life quite difficult for some people. And to be honest, as a landlord, if you've got a good tenant, you don't normally ask them to leave, you know, you're usually quite happy to keep them in place.
Thank you, Councillor Edwards. I suppose firstly, just to kind of address your point on the Renters' Rights Act and the challenges, you know, obviously it's not a perfect piece of legislation and there are issues with it naturally, but I think on the whole it will hopefully be a beneficial thing for renters across the period of time that it is in place. But I appreciate that it is challenging for landlords as well. So we've worked really hard in the lead up to it to engage landlords and to work with our landlord forum and to work with our different networks to both educate and get them prepared for it. So hopefully that we'll see that, and we are seeing the benefits of that. Obviously, I think in the lead up to it, there was, you know, a slight rise in Section 21s, but I don't think it was such a rise that we were anticipating. I think it was less than that. But equally, you know, that has provided some challenges. I'm just trying to remember your other points.
Self-employed.
The self-employed one, I will leave to Kelly, and there was one more right at the end, but I've forgotten it. If you...
staying put till the bailiffs.
Yeah. So that one is just the legal right, I think, in terms of at the time when the Section 20, they have the right to appeal and to go through the court process. I think that is just standard rights that shelter would and you're entitled to. So I think we just provide that advice in terms of that. Yeah. But again, Kelly will probably correct me or
Thank you, Chair. I think it would be helpful, certainly if Ben could join us at the table, because there's some detail that would be really helpful.
Absolutely,
And,
please, yeah.
so that they're not left out. I wonder if it might be quite nice for our other colleagues.
We've got plenty of seats here. You can bring the whole team.
But just to pick up on a few of those points before I bring Ben in, perhaps on the detail. So, yeah, renters' rights, there's been some trepidation. We've been quite nervous about what that would look like and what the impact would be. And so because of that, we've done an awful lot of work with local landlords and, you know, a communication strategy to make sure that both tenants and landlords are aware of the new legislation, and that we were having those points of communication with both. So, because, you know, the conversations that we have with landlords definitely reflects that nervousness and that worry, big change, and also the beginning of a change in regulation and a levelling of the playing field of the sort of regulation that we see in social housing coming at private landlords as well. So a lot of nervousness in the landlord market. And we're really just trying to take the approach of an opportunity of engagement and awareness and, you know, kind of developing that understanding whilst also helping and supporting and hopefully settling that position in. We haven't seen a really significant, unless Ben's going to tell me something different, since the 1st of May. We haven't seen that really significant shift in terms of, you know, the loss of private rented accommodation is and always will be our biggest reason and contributor for homelessness. It's also our biggest way of resolving homelessness. So it's it's got a double threat for us. And that's why we spend an awful lot of time on thinking about how we can prevent and have strategies to really engage early, support landlords, support tenants, and it all sort of, you know, comes together. There are landlords leaving the market. There are also other landlords, bigger volume landlords, smaller volume landlords selling, higher volume landlords typically sort of picking up those properties. And so you're seeing a kind of almost a bit of a stability in what we see in the local picture in BCP. And I'll let Ben pick up the detail in terms of the approach to how we deal with and the advice that we give and how much we can intervene and when. Some of that will come down to resource and the management of many 1,000 inquiries that we see a month around homelessness and housing advice. So, you know, we have no choice but to require people to stay until they're legally entitled to be moved or removed. And that's important to bear in mind the context in terms of the significant demands. And also, it's just a plug that Ben will definitely repeat. The earlier people can come to us, the better chance we have of not having to leave it right to the last minute and being able to support people into alternative accommodation and therefore avoiding homelessness and that kind of crisis point. So that's absolutely key and critical to our approach. If I can, invite Ben to come in.
Yeah, please, Ben.
Thank you. So Ben Tomlin, I'm Head of Strategic Housing and Partnerships. So Councillor Wilson is absolutely right. We've got a legal responsibility to provide any tenant with advice and information about their housing options and housing rights. And as part of that information and responsibility and duty, we advise tenants about the process that they may be subject to through an eviction process, which in receipt of a Section 21 notice as was, and then the process that could happen to take that tenant to court and then ultimately receive a bailiff's warrant. The Homelessness Code of Guidance provides all councils with information about how they should go about doing that, what they should and shouldn't do, and no council should have a policy by which they are saying to tenants they should stay until the bailiffs arrive in order to gain assistance. We provide the information about the tenant's rights, but that's not a policy that we provide, but it is absolutely a perception out there that some tenants and some landlords may have about the information and advice that the team provides. In the vast majority of cases, tenants that have received a notice need a fair amount of time in today's market to find alternative accommodation. And if they're struggling to do that, and if they can't find an alternative, the council can intervene if in certain circumstances to provide an offer of temporary accommodation without the need for any bailiff warrant. So some tenants choose to stay until the bailiff warrant because it gives them more time to find alternative suitable accommodation. It very much depends on circumstance to circumstance, but there, just to provide some assurance that there is no policy that advises tenants to stay put until that warrant.
Councillor Edwards, do you want to come back on
I
that?
just wanted to ask what support there was there from the council for self-employed people, because that is harder. You know, you've got to show all these accounts and all sorts of things, and it's not easy for them.
So any household, whether they're self-employed or on low income, and they're threatened with homelessness receives a dedicated support and inclusion officer to help them find alternative accommodation. So there will be a financial assessment, an income expenditure assessment of what they can afford in terms of suitable accommodation, and that support and inclusion officer will stick with them through the process, but whether that's to find them alternative accommodation in the private rented sector or another offer until they get permanent housing. But it's a case-by-case basis, individual financial assessment, does include people that are self-employed, and it is really difficult. There is a shortage of affordable private rented housing. So there is no magic solution, but there is a dedicated worker that will always stick with that household to find them something suitable.
And can I ask, who do they contact?
So there's a generic email address, which is BCP Council Housing Advice. No, it's not. It's housing advice
at BCP
That's
Council.
Thank you.
.gov.uk.
I should know that. That's the best way to
Housing advice.
at bcpcouncil.gov.uk. So that is an inbox that's monitored every single day, and where we receive all our inquiries from. And there's a portal on the website as well that people can access that information to.
We can circulate.
Yeah, please do. If you can circulate that email address and the link to the portal, that'd be really useful. Please don't. I'm sure. Hopefully, you'll have something to come back with in a bit. Next, I've got Councillor Ricketts.
I'd just like to say that the delivery against the strategy, it continues to impress. And I think it's very positive what we're seeing. But here comes the but face. I've got some concerns about resources and funding going forward. So I've actually got 3 questions, and it's all on sort of funding and resource. I'll do it one at a time, Kieran, so that you can remember. So the first one is about the private sector enforcement. The strategy mentions about improving standards, and I just want to know if our enforcement teams currently have adequate resource, both staff and budget, to proactively tackle rogue landlords, or if our approach is merely reactive, and if we're looking to get more proactive. So that's the first question.
Can you? But I just, I mean, I think it. I think Gail said it in the last item. You know, I think we would always want more resources, and we'd always. There's never enough resources for what we want to achieve or what we want to do. Doesn't matter how, you know, we've got these list of successes. There's always more we want to do. I think in terms of private rented enforcement, I think it's something that has, along with a lot of things in local government, has declined in terms of resources and its ability. So it was at a point of needing to be reactive. But what we've agreed, myself and please don't correct me on this, the director is starting to look at a service plan that starts to build back both, you know, private rented enforcement, but also stuff across our regulatory services. So trading standards, environmental health, licensing. We want to start building back those services where we have cut them over the past 10 years, probably. You know, we want to start getting them back to where they are more proactive. So I'd say, from my experience, it is probably a reactive service currently, but we're building it back to a proactive service. And yeah, hopefully Kelly's not going to contradict me.
I won't.
Yeah, Kelly, please.
I won't contradict him. Is it still right for me to come in if I'm not contradicting?
I don't know if you're not contradicting. I mean, it feels like, yeah, please go ahead.
Yeah, great question. It's definitely a service area that has, you know, that there's lots of different challenges around private sector housing enforcement. First of all, the resource and the level of resource that we have. Secondly, the skills shortage issue. It's huge in regulatory services, environmental health officers, trading standards officers, and then private sector housing officers are quite a specialist bunch with specific qualifications, and then the experience of applying, you know, that the standards is difficult to match, and it's difficult to recruit to. So even if we had a lot of vacancies, we would genuinely struggle to build in that space. But Councillor Wilson is exactly right that over the years, we've seen a lot of reductions around budget and a move in the regulatory space to a sort of statutory minimum that we needed to work to as a result of reductions in our budget. And I promise you this is nothing to do with the departure of the previous head of public protection, but this year we have taken the strategy of needing to recover that from that position, because frankly, you know, there's preventative work that we can do that ultimately would save resources in the long run, you know, avoid issues moving into homelessness, you know, where you've got poor housing conditions and those sorts of factors. So we're in our service plan this year, we have a priority being very overt in wanting to rebuild some of those enforcement-based services and work more closely with areas like homelessness and housing advice to understand and pursue preventative work that is much more proactive. That said, part of our strategy is going to need to be, how do we recruit the right people into those roles? So apprenticeships and those sorts of strategies are part of our thinking, very much so at the moment.
Councillor Ricketts, question 2.
Thank you. So going back to like the environmental health side of things, with the decent home standards and BCP's housing stock, does your delivery plan fully fund the remediation of damp and mould and the energy efficiency issues at present?
Yeah. Yes, it's the simple answer, I guess. Our decent home standard is really, really good. So I think 81% of our stock, our own stock, has been surveyed so far, and of that, like 0. Maybe 0.
Right now it's 0.
No, of 0, completely
0.
0.
Yeah.
I didn't even know that. That's fresh information to me, so that's fantastic. Yeah, so we have 0.
Yeah.
Okay, fantastic. We're doing even better than I thought. This is brilliant. This is glad I come along. We've got 0 non-decent properties. Wow. Really?
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, so that's absolutely fantastic. So yeah, we are covering it. Is the simple answer. Yeah.
Well, that was an easy one, and it's funny because I was actually going to ask you percentages, but I didn't want to put you on the spot.
Because previously we had 20
That's
that
right.
were yeah. So yeah, see, I go away for a month. And
So the final question is, it's grant funding resilience, and yeah, Kelly, have we got a plan B framework if the national grant allocations are reduced, or if individual schemes fail to meet funding deadlines?
Happy for me to go. Yeah, grant funding. We have in fact, we were just discussing the housing and public protection budget earlier. We have a really significant reliance, especially in Ben's world, around strategic housing and partnerships and homelessness. Big reliance on grant funding. Positive news for us in terms of slightly longer term settlements coming from government, which does help us. But yeah, a significant proportion of statutory services that are funded by grant. So we do the best we can to make sure that we maximise the value of those grants while we have them, that we lobby for continued support. We're always, in fact, this is literally the conversation that we were having earlier about the act and the skill of wheeling and dealing through your budget to make sure that you absolutely maximise and have have the greatest impact. That's absolutely where we are, but it is always as short term as the grant that's available to us. We've got big resources in our housing revenue account. You know, we have a sort of £60 million a year rental income that is ring fenced to the HRA, and so there's a lot more certainty. And now the government are providing us with much more long-term rent settlement policies to support us in our longer-term planning around the HRA. In the general fund, it is down to a bit of a knife edge in terms of the availability of the grant, some income, because we have quite a lot of our own temporary accommodation. So we're reviewing that at the moment and looking at how we can really stretch that income that comes naturally from temporary accommodation and being a landlord in the general fund space. How can we really sort of make that part of our baseline, make that part of our security? But it is a risk. It is a really significant risk.
Good. Okay, thank you. I've got three more on the list. I've got Councillor Goodall, Councillor Tilton Gibson and myself as well. So Councillor Goodall.
Thank you, Chair. A couple of questions, if I may. I had a course, I was leafleting. You may have noticed there have been elections around here recently. And I had cause to report some flats, both to the fire, both to the fire people and to environmental health. This was and both of them reported back. There were two issues with this. The first one was to do with the fact that they weren't habitable, basically, and secondly, they were run effectively by an agency. So the fire service that came back to me said they were dealing with an agency, quite a well-known one in the area. I just wondered in the first instance whether or not that's something we would be reported back to you, so that in terms of the quality of the housing. So, for example, this is rather with the fire, I don't mean this. The smoke alarm had been covered with tape because people were smoking outside the flats on the balcony, that sort of thing. So the first question was simply: is there a mechanism that exists so that this, from environmental health and for the fire reference, is there a method by which they report back to you?
Kelly, go ahead, please.
Thank you. Yeah. So actually, the Councillor Ricketts, it's that mentioned the private sector housing enforcement team, and it would be that team that would be involved in that. So we have a really good relationship with the fire service. We work with them side by side all the time, and there are some areas where our legislation kind of butts up against each other. That sounds too negative, actually, but we're shoulder to shoulder in terms of the tools and the powers and the opportunity that we have around enforcement and making sure that we have the right standards. Fire safety, as you can imagine, post Grenfell is a huge issue, not just for social landlords, but in general. And so there's an awful lot of work that happens in that space. So yes, it's the sort of thing, and there'll be some things that are a fire service requirement to enforce and some things that will be the council's requirement to enforce. So we would work together on some of those issues. And of course, that's exactly the sort of issue where we've got perhaps residents reporting in those sorts of concerns about how their block is being managed, or particularly concerns around fire. They would be reported to us potentially by a resident, and we would obviously then prioritise that within our private sector housing enforcement team.
I mean, I think one of the problems here was that the residents were creating the problem in the first place. So, I mean, that was the issue, and the fire agency was not happy. Very, very briefly, and it's generic really, but it's to do with the fact that we are your critical friends. And I do wonder with some of them, and it does vary depending. I mean, I sit on the ONS board, which met on Monday, and now the environment today. But it's just with some of the ways. Can I just read an example? Because it's just some of the way that we have to go through all this, and it's wonderful. I think you work really hard, but some of it, I do wonder about the use of English, and I'm sorry if I'm going to sound pompous. The paragraph below was an example: development of an enabling environment to create the right conditions to unlock stalled sites which are controlled by third parties. This partnership approach allows for identification of the issues impacting on delivery and viability gaps to develop a site-by-site case for intervention. There are 9,000 homes with planning consent which are yet to complete, presenting an opportunity for the council to develop proposals to accelerate these homes and build an investment case for Homes England and private sector capital to deliver more affordable housing. I just wrote, does this mean we are trying to unlock stalled housing sites not controlled by the council? Once we understand why sites are remaining underdeveloped, we can help to get the 9,000 homes with planning consent built.
I think that's a really good edit from you. Yeah, I think take that on board. I think that's certainly far too wordy, and I did have that. I wasn't going to raise it myself, obviously, but I did have that paragraph in mind, and I do think there is, in general, a need for reporting across the council to be more in layman's terms. But yeah, I think
I am that layman. I need all the help I can get. And while if we are to be constructive in our criticism, we need single sentences occasionally.
yeah.
Thank you. That's, yeah, quite the, was that even one paragraph? Anyway, basically what that means is we need to build more homes. We've got an affordability and a housing crisis. We need to work and enable, really sort of embrace our role as an enabling. We're a council who wants to not just deliver our own council homes because there's limitations around that, but actually how we work with many partners to do that, and then secure more funding, do more. That essentially is ultimately what it comes down to, unlocking new homes. So yeah, I do take the point. And if I may, just coming back on one of the previous question, you made me think about how important it is to, back to the fire example where residents were causing the issue. There's a really big important role for us in all sorts of areas, like private sector housing. We talked about the importance of resource and having proactive resource, but there's also something about education, making sure that people understand their own responsibilities and what causes issues in terms of fire or damp and mould, and the things that can contribute to those sorts of standards issues. Education is a really important part of for us of that. And again, in then relation to housing and homelessness, we are actually funding, through some of our grant money, comms officers who are helping us to get the message out there. Perhaps those comms officers might want to have a look at some of our reports. But thank you for the feedback.
Thank you. Councillor Dalton Gibson.
Yes, I will limit myself because, needless to say, I would ask a lot. I'm very mindful, if you do the maths, that if you had one landlord who was awarded every penalty under the Renters' Rights Act, it comes out at something like £670,000 just for one single property. Obviously, the idea of civil penalties is that the local authority are able to then fund more enforcement, a bit like Councillor Ricketts' comments about being able to do so. I think there's two areas around that. I would be quite interested if in future, maybe once a year, sort of after, say, May, when it started, we had a report that it indicated how many civil penalties had been issued, but equally how many have been collected, because I believe there's quite an issue with not being able to collect them. And obviously we can't pay enforcement officers to be out enforcing if we don't collect the money to do so. The second related thing is around what I would call baseline funding. Because actually, if we're really successful, the danger is that they think, oh, you're getting lots of enforcement money, so they take away your baseline funding. And then, of course, you get rid of all the bad landlords, and then you've got no money left because obviously they've lost your baseline funding. And I wondered what we are doing to protect that baseline funding so that even if everybody acts perfectly, we're still able to be out there and checking and enforcing.
Thank you. So the government are really clear in terms of civil penalties and the future strategy around renters' rights and the resources that local authorities need. They've given us some new burdens funding for now, but very much with an expectation that in the future we will be funding ourselves through civil penalties. So slightly sort of perverse in terms of the sort of incentivising that, but a necessary part of the enforcement world in general. So we have some base resources for private sector housing. We maintained a baseline level, which is, in fairness, is around sort of five, 6 officers. We then also have other officers who are funded through HMO licensing, which obviously gives us income through licensing, and there will be additional posts that we will want to, that we've put in place recently that we'll want to continue funding through new burdens, and eventually we'll need to look at through civil penalties. And I think the need for the resource is going to come down to what we find in these first few months and year, really, around the level of demand and what we see. But we are really hoping that it isn't about use of civil penalties and enforcement officer type activity. We really want to be in that space of supportive working together, education, working with landlords. We always say there should be a sort of 80-20 rule in terms of enforcement, and 80% is where you're aiming your, collaborative work and education and support and coaching almost sometimes through really complex systems and legislative requirements. We ideally wouldn't be in a position where we're doing an awful lot of enforcement, but that's going to be a necessity that we need to pursue, and we need to see how that goes. There's other elements in terms of new bits of the Act that will come and that will be shaped over time that we need to see. So our baseline funding, we do have baseline funding in private sector housing enforcement. And of course, again, this just to make the point back to Ben's world and strategic housing and the homelessness side of things, we really want to think about how the private sector housing world, think about it less as a reduce our silo working, which, believe it or not, you'd never guess, would you? Even in one directorate of 450 staff, there are little pockets of silos. Of course there are. And we're really trying to break those barriers. And the Renters' Rights Act has given us quite a unique opportunity to do that. So not quite sure what it will look like in the future, but perhaps there might be a collaborative team that looks at things from many different angles and is supported by base funding, civil penalties, and a bit of grant. But we don't quite know yet. It's a bit too early, I would say.
Thank you. Very encouraging. I'm always badgering on about getting out the silos, so I'm delighted to hear that. Part of my questioning, you see, is I'm aware one of the councils in London I work with, they fund 63 enforcement officers. And it's basically, they just go down the high street and find people not advertising an EPC and issue a penalty, and then they've got another enforcement officer. But I was just very mindful that I can see that there's a lot of demand on our finance, and the temptation would therefore be to cut it. But then as you get less, hopefully we become more successful, we educate more. We still need to keep the capacity. Thank you.
Thank you. I've got 5 questions, but I don't think I'm going to ask them all. This is the problem. We see a lot of you, and the more you bring us papers, the more we learn and the more we want to know. So the first one is just on the numbers. I just saw that they didn't, in the main report, you've got talking about the ambition to deliver up to 600 homes over the next 10 years, but in Appendix A, it gives a target of 980, which is the right number.
So I asked the same question because, alarm bells start ringing. And basically the 600 new homes are completely new homes that are not currently in the pipeline in the project. We've got 280 homes, 380 homes currently planned for. We've got, we know where they're going, etc., etc. The 600 homes are completely new homes. So in total it is 980. Does that make sense?
That makes perfect sense. Yeah, I just wanted to make sure we were talking about the same.
Yeah,
the same figures.
I double checked with Kelly just before the with the meeting.
Just to say, the reason probably for that's not absolutely solid is because it's not yet. We've only just revised our 30-year business plan for the housing revenue account. The priority was to make sure that we had the right funds in place to continue to deliver and look after our 10,000 council homes. And then only once we had, good data through stock condition surveys, good assurance in terms of the quality of the stock and what we need going forward, solid asset management plans, only then could we look at what the opportunity was for future funding of new build. And we're building that programme. John and Kerry, who are with us, are part of that. We're building that now. And so quite where that lands, somewhere in the remit, we hope, of 600 new homes. It probably is a bit more, in fact, but it's something that we are working through at the moment, looking to set a programme for 10 years.
Great, thank you. The second question is on the temporary accommodation. In the report, it gives the 10% reduction in dependency, which is obviously great, and we want to see it continually, hopefully, go down. But what does that look like when it comes to the cost reductions, or if there are any cost reductions? Because you've also got the significant budget risks are the expenditure on potential emergency accommodation with prices going up, and that what's the pressure actually looking like on a cash level, and what's the resource looking like towards it?
if you might want to come in on this at all. But in terms of the budget, we're delivering reductions. We've seen reductions in bed and breakfast use. That's where the real pinch point is in terms of the budget cost, but also the cost to those families potentially, or household single people and couples that are living in that short-term accommodation. So we're quite fortunate in that our temporary accommodation portfolio, I sit on a board with an improvement board with a London borough who have a lot of incredibly expensive temporary accommodation outside of B&B. We don't have that. A lot of that is because we do that ourselves and deliver that ourselves. So important to be conscious of that. But we've just this year reduced our budget by £700,000, our B&B, essentially our B&B budget. And in the outturn last year, we came in just slightly over where we might have liked to be, but that's because of that sustained reduction and the work that the team do. So we've contributed to baseline savings, and a lot of that is because of that really sort of sweating our grant, making sure that we're using the grant funding to make sure that we deliver savings against the base, which is positive. So we're confident about the delivery of our savings that we have programmed in for this year, and we came in under budget in the last financial year. Anything else on TA?
Just one, I guess one thing I'd add is that within temporary accommodation, we've got a range of different types of temporary accommodation. So vast majority of it, the council own, and therefore there isn't a significant net cost to providing your own temporary accommodation. But where we do have to procure accommodation or have lease arrangements with different housing providers, the housing benefit subsidy doesn't allow for the council to recoup most of those costs. So therefore there's a net cost to the council. So we're reviewing our temporary accommodation portfolio this year to make sure that we're gaining some further efficiencies, not just through reductions in bed and breakfast, but thinking about what parts of that portfolio we might not really need anymore. And the more expensive parts are the least cost arrangements, where we have arrangements with different providers because we don't receive the housing benefits subsidy that covers all of those costs.
Thanks. That potentially is something really interesting that we maybe want to look at then if it's going in the right direction. Councillor Wilson.
Yeah, and I was just going to say, it's also part of a wider holistic kind of view of housing, because everything else we do reduces our cost of temporary accommodation, you know, in terms of our homelessness prevention, in terms of, you know, our private rented sector enforcement, you know, to make sure that properties are habitable. All these things add up to reducing that temporary accommodation bill as well. So it's not just what we're doing with temporary accommodation itself, it's the whole housing package across the board.
Thank you. That's pretty reassuring. I'll make this my last question because we are getting pushed for time. This is on the C1 rating, and obviously it's a good news story. Last time was the first time I think we'd got that. The significance in terms of it is that it needs, as I understand it, monitoring for continuous improvement, and that's always ongoing. The delivery plan tells us that the resident engagement strategy and survey is slipped to 27-28, and I think that's quite a big part of the ongoing monitoring, isn't it, with the resident satisfaction? So what is the assessed regulatory risk from that delay, and does it impact on potentially the C1 rating in the future, or are we confident that we're going to be able to maintain that going forwards?
Thank you. I'm a bit confused because the resident engagement strategy is completed. So, but what we did do after the C1 rating is delay we're putting together a 5-year plan for BCP homes, which is our strategic, our sort of, we haven't had a long-term strategy for what, you know, we have some long-term strategies, but one overarching document that says we're a 10,000 home council landlord, we're in lots of different areas, you know, big stockholder in areas like West Howe or, you know, Turling Moor. What's the future look like? What are we going to deliver and how are we going to support those communities? So it's that one that is delayed.
That's right. I've just realised I'm reading cross lines on that.
The reason for that is because, frankly, we needed to just take a moment. You know, the C1 was hard work, and we just needed, you know, to sort of reflect and consider actually, you know, have that kind of moment of consolidation, which is something that Kieran challenged me on a little while back, actually. because you know it's an exciting sort of area of work, and there's great ambition and great opportunity. We just needed to make sure that we were settling into a space of we've got a C1, we know we're compliant. What next? And the what next will be in that 5-year strategy. We just needed to take a moment and take a beat before we jumped into that. So it's not a have to do, it's not a requirement from any regulatory sort of perspective, but it will help us to answer the question of how does our council stock contribute to the council's corporate strategy, and you know what our residents want. So it'll be a good one when we get there.
That's great, thanks. Yeah, I just want to make sure you keep your top rating, so that was my concern. It sounds like it's the right thing to do. All right, I think on that we can probably end this unless anyone has anything they want to add, any recommendations. I don't have anything. There is a recommendation in here, bear with me a second. It's to note progress, achievements and challenges set out in this report. If everyone's content to just note that. Kelly.
I'm really sorry to do this in terms of last word, but 30 years into this role, not this role, lots of roles, but in working in housing, I'm honestly I'm so proud of where we are. We're in there's more to do, there's always more to do. The new housing strategy is a moment that should be really exciting, and I want us to make it that. I don't want us to go there unless it's exciting and it's there and it's ambitious in terms of our need. But these guys that I work with all the time, and Kieran as well, what a great team, and I just wanted to just note that really in terms of the achievement, despite long lengthy reports, and somehow we find the time to say too much. There's an awful lot of really amazing work, and when I go out and talk to other councils, honestly it's evident. So thank you everybody, and thank you guys for the role that you play in Critical Friend.
Thank you. I think that's a good last word to have. Yeah, I'm really pleased to see the direction that it's all gone as well since my time with BCP as well. It is a good news story. We do like seeing you here. Thank you for coming again. That takes us on to item 11, which is our work plan. We've now done our work planning session, and I'd just like to introduce Lindsay, who I think will take us through this item, if you can, please.
Thank you, Chair, and hello, committee. There are a few bits to go over with you on this, so I will get through it as quickly as I can, but we may spend a little bit longer than we normally would on this item, because this is the point at which we conclude the work planning activity that has been taking place across all the committees. And in terms of your committee, we can now formalise your refresh work plan that will be in place for the remainder of the council term. And of course, you can tweak it in your different meetings as needed, but largely we want to try and set something in place so that you know what's coming up and you can give appropriate direction to everyone. So you've got 3 recommendations in the work plan cover report. The first is to agree that refresh work plan, and then there's 2 others around what you need to say back to council on any items that they had referred to you and that you may not be taking forward. There's a requirement for you to report back to council, and also there are some referrals to other bodies that you had said in your work planning workshop that you would like to make, and so we need to formalise those tonight. So if it's okay, Chair, I would like to kick off though with just reconfirming your lens of sustainability. We didn't actually include that on the recommendations of the report, but this is a timely point just to reconfirm that with the committee formally. We did discuss it in your workshop, so I'm pretty sure that you're all happy to do that, but if I could just check that with you.
Yeah, can I just check that everyone's content with that? Agreed. Yeah, that's agreed.
Lovely, thank you. And then if we move on to your refreshed work plan, that's in your Modern Gov papers at page 85. I would say that within your work plan, you've structured yours in a way that I find quite exciting for this committee, because you have picked out, I would say, 3 particular key topics that you intend to spend a longer amount of time on. So perhaps dedicating most of a meeting into deep dives, and that's a brilliant way to focus scrutiny so that you're getting the most value out of what you're doing. Less is always more. So I just wanted to reflect on what those three particular topics are, because we have drafted into the work plan an outline of scope for you, which lifts the scopes that were discussed within your workshop. And I want to confirm that that is what you would like to do. So the first key topic is in July, in relation to Christchurch Harbour. You've said that you would like to invite the Environment Agency and Wessex Water in for a discussion with you. You can see on page 86 of your pack the detail around the scope for that. And I just want to confirm that the committee is happy to do that and for us to progress with those invitations.
Again, consensus on that? Yeah, that's agreed.
Lovely. Van life is the second one in September, but I'm going to put a pin in that for a moment and move on to the November slot, which is around sustainable energy. That very much follows on from your discussions that you've had with the Net Zero Hub tonight. We've set out the proposed scope again there, which melds together two scopes that were put forward, and you said you wanted to combine in your workshop. So I'm just looking for your agreement around that scope, and also to ask if you would want to also invite the Net Zero Hub into that discussion to contribute as they have tonight.
How's everyone with that on the 18th? Yeah, sounds good. And about extending the invite again to the Net Zero Hub, I feel like they were really useful tonight, and if they wanted to come back, then in my opinion, they'd be more than welcome. Yeah, no one's dissenting from that, so yeah, we can agree to do that.
Lovely, thank you. And then if I take us back to the van life item in September, that is scheduled for a committee item in September and also a working group to get some insight directly from van dwellers, which we're proposing to take place in June. I'll come back onto the working group in a minute to formalise arrangements around that if I could. So I just wanted to, highlight that you had that briefing from officers around van life data and some information around that between meetings. And within that session, you reflected as a committee on how you want to progress this work. And just to clarify that the ask of council for this item was to develop a community pact around van dwellers, but you have said as a committee that you couldn't do that without an understanding of the needs of van dwellers and understanding how the council can meet those needs. And so what is proposed in your September committee slot is to bring in some information from a working group meeting at which you can talk directly to some van dwellers, and then accompany that with a range of data and information requests that I have set out that I think you will need in order to gain a good picture of the strategic activity around provision of services to meet needs for van dwellers, things like site provision, and so that you can understand as a committee what is actually being done or planned to be done to meet van dwellers' needs. So as you know, it's a really complex topic, but I think this will give you enough of a picture to be able to form a position and make some recommendations back to Cabinet. So I'm really looking for your agreement to that proposed scope of work, so that as officers we can go and ask for what I would see is a range of briefing notes from different council departments on the specific elements and data requests that we can bring together in a report, and also bring those officers into that meeting with you in September, so that you can discuss that issue in the round. So can I just check around that proposed scope, and then I'll move on to the working group if I could.
Yep. Everyone clear on the scope and happy to agree? Yep, again, that's great.
Lovely, thank you. And in terms of the working group meeting, what we've proposed is a small group of councillors that can hear from directly some insight from van dwellers, and this has been generated through a survey that the committee did earlier in the year, at which it reached out and asked for some input from people who are living in vans about what their needs are and what their lifestyle choices are around that. And a number of them said they'd be willing to talk to the committee further. So we are looking to arrange a session. It will be an extended session in terms of using a slot that you have already in your diary for a briefing meeting, but it will probably take longer than the slot that is reserved, but would be in the evening of the 10th of June. We've had 3 councillors come forward to say they'd be willing to participate. Those are Councillor Dalton Gibson, Councillor Jackie Edwards and Councillor Moriarty. So I'd like to firstly check that those members are all happy to formally join that working group and are available on the 10th of June.
Yeah,
I'll follow up with Councillor
yeah,
Edwards.
and we'll have to follow up with Councillor Edwards because she's had to leave. But that's 2 out of 3, yes.
Okay, lovely. And if I could also just suggest that session, either in that session or perhaps in a separate one, I think the committee needs to scope in some time to talk with Kushti Bok to understand the needs of the Gypsy Roman Traveller community. And would you be happy to also include that within that 10th of June session or another date if needed, but as a working group piece of activity?
How do people feel about that? I think it's a good suggestion to have Kushti Bok and have that contact with them outside of the formal meeting in September. I'd probably be more inclined to push it away from the 10th of June if the working group were okay with that and have it at a separate time, just because I feel like it might be overloaded if we're having a number of people coming who are living in vans and then Kushti Bok, so perhaps we could arrange a separate session. Does that sound reasonable? David, yeah. Is that okay, Lindsay? Is that something we could do?
Yep, that's fine. We'll look into that. Thank you for that direction. Are you happy for me to move on, Chair?
Yes, please.
Yep. Okay. So just to mention that you have some cabinet reports also scoped into your work plan, but there are some spaces for you to identify cabinet reports that may come up through the year under the pre-decision scrutiny slots. And you have a list of, I think, 4 reserve items that you've identified through your work planning that you could bring in if slots become empty or available for whatever reason. So they are identified in your work plan. Also, you agreed in your workshop that you would want to retain the rapporteur items that you'd already agreed to as a committee. I think they're mainly ones that Councillor Rice is leading. So they're included, and you've got some briefing topics, but those need date scheduling. And we had agreed with you informally that we would prioritise the van life work. So they have shunted and need dates, but the topics are reflected. So that's a very quick run through of the work plan. And yeah, can the committee let me know if they're happy to approve it formally?
Looking for consensus to approve.
Agreed.
Agreed. Yep, that's unanimous.
Thank you. Okay, so moving on to other items and items that you want to refer to elsewhere. If I direct you to page 82 in your Modern Gov pack, and that's the work plan cover report, there is an outline of what those are. I'll just make my screen bigger so I can see them too. So I'm just looking for some formal agreement around the items in paragraph 23. So the first one is under reference B. There was a request to look at HMOs, and as a group you said, well, actually there's a working group around the housing strategy that could be better placed there. So I want to just check that you're happy to formally pass that proposed scope of work over to that working group for them to consider whether they would like to look at that instead of you.
Everyone content to let that item go across to the housing strategy? Yep, it's agreed.
Thank you. Under reference D, the safe accommodation strategy follow-up work. This follows a working group that you did as a committee. We're waiting for that strategy to go through Cabinet. It's expected to go through within a suite of strategies in July. And the Overview and Scrutiny Board will look at that because the wider suite falls within the remit of that board. So you had 3 particular work plan items where you would sort of be monitoring and contributing a bit more to that strategy, and the suggestion is that you pass them across to the ONS board. So if you're happy to agree, that will formally feed that into the next board meeting.
Again, everyone content? Yep, that's agreed.
Great. Reference E is flooding and infrastructure resilience. This was a more recent recommendation that came through from council for you to do, or referral, I should say, for you to do some work on this. Within your workshop, you reflected on added value and what resource you have overall for all the topics, and you said that there was a limited direct influence that the council can have on some aspects of the topic, and so you didn't choose to include that within the work plan at this stage. So there's a requirement on you to report that back to council. But you did make the comment that if a flood advisory group were to be established by the council, that would be an appropriate vehicle to be looking at that sort of work. So we would look to be taking a report back into council on all the overview and scrutiny work plans, and will reflect this comment back on behalf of the Environment and Place Committee within that report, if you're happy to formalise that that is your approach to that topic.
Again, just looking for consensus.
Happy with that?
Everyone? Yeah, that's agreed.
Yeah, thank you. Climate and nature under reference F. This was a referral from council. It's not so much that you're not doing this, it's rather that you haven't agreed to progress this in line with the council referral, but you're doing other probably more effectively scoped work under this sort of topic with other scrutiny items that you have selected. So you just need to report that back to council as well. And I'll just keep moving on so that we don't waste time. So, and under reference G, Red Hill paddling pool, that was a referral to the committee to do a sort of like what happened there and what can we do in the future with that piece. And the committee reflected on this. It had sat on the work plan for a little while because you didn't have resource to progress it, and you said that at this stage now you felt that the work that you could do in terms of the council request wouldn't be impactful, given that we've now got established town councils and the as yet unknown potential for them to oversee assets such as paddling pools and things like that. So you didn't feel it would be valuable to progress that ask of council, but you did say that there was a referral to be made into the ONS board in relation to that topic, because they asset scrutiny sits under the remit of that board, and they have also some work identified in terms of liaising with the new town councils in the future. So that is both a comment back to council and a referral into the ONS board if you're happy to formalise it. So that's item F and G if you're happy to approve both of those.
Again, everyone good with that?
Agreed.
Agreed. Okay, again, unanimous.
Lovely. And I think that is it. You'll be pleased to know. I think I can. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think that reflects how good the work planning session was, that we got through all that and took a lot of those items forward, and the ones that we didn't, we've got good plans going ahead. So thanks to the committee and to you as well, Lindsay, for guiding us through that and reporting back on it. Much appreciated. So with that, all that leaves is item 12 for tonight, which is the corporate performance report for Q3. You'll be pleased to know that this is for information only and not for debate. So we can then move on to the final item, which is me letting you know the date of the next meeting, which will be Wednesday, the 15th of July. And to say thank you very much for being here. Thanks to everyone who joined us, anyone who watched along at home, and good night and enjoy the rest of your evenings. Thank you.